I'm going to say something kind of obvious here, and that's if you do a job, you should do it well. That's my philosophy. It's always what I believe. And I think in most cases, if you don't think you can do the job well, you probably shouldn't do the job in the first place. But the world isn't always that simple. Let me talk about that more. Hey, this is Perch, and we're continuing on with my awkward lead off of the cold open into the music that goes to the video. I still have not mastered the what is the tagline I'm supposed to say there. Maybe I need a I don't know, whatever. I won't subject you to more of that talk, but your comments are welcome. Anyway, the thing to talk about here is I did a video recently on racism in comics, and I got a lot of good comments. I appreciated all the comments. People like, we agree, we don't agree. I got the one guy who said he'll always downvote everything I do, downvoting it. He sleeps on the job though. He's not doing the job well. See, he misses. Several videos will go by at 100%, and then I'm like, oh, he figured out, he remembered. So you got to subscribe. He needs to subscribe. You got to subscribe, and then you'll know to downvote. That's all I'm saying. No shame. Anyway, but one of the things I said in the video about racism that I think I didn't communicate well or I didn't land well, and I'll take ownership of that. I went back and listened to the video, and I don't like to do that because I hate the sound of my voice. But I got to I'm what is it? Adam Driver is the same way. I could be in Star Wars. Anyway, the there's a point I was making, which is if you're going to you should avoid tackling racism and racism as a topic in comics unless you're able to do it well. And I think I didn't say it that succinctly in my earlier video, but that's what I believe. And I think you can extend that to just topics in general. And I've done, video on environmentalism and global warming and a couple different social topics and politics and all the rest. And I think it all comes down to the same thing, which is if you're going to do a job, do it well. If you're going to describe a topic that is emotional or sensitive or any of those things, if you're going to put yourself out there and tackle a tough subject, then you need to be able to tackle it with some grace and with some discipline and with some nuance, and you're going to need to do a good job, a good effective job at discussing that topic. And what I see a lot in comics is that it's not somebody who's doing the job well, because I think what happens is, really strong comic writers, people who are in it to win it. They're in it for decades. And well, I'll put it this way. I'll use three dramatically different examples. So I'll use Scott Snyder, I'll use Tom King, and I'll use Jonathan Hickman. Three extremely different writers, different styles, different approaches, and each one has their fans. There are people who love Tom King's run on Batman. There's people who, for the record, I think he ended it well. For what it's worth, I thought the City of Bane storyline was painful, and I'll do a whole video on this topic. But the last issue I felt was a good issue. It just whatever. Anyway, all three guys, you'll notice, tend to avoid really ham-fisted projects. Now, you may say, well, wait a minute, what about that time in Tom King's Batman when he was talking about religion and what you believe and all the rest? I mean, even though that triggered some people, I felt like he still handled it as a complex topic. And what I mean by that is if you go to some other writers, if you look at well, put it this way, the way that bigotry was handled in Iceman, homophobia was handled in Iceman, rather. The issue where Bobby comes out to his parents and the dad goes, can't you just be something else, and kind of like burst of muty, now gay, and it was handled in a very blunt way, not a way that really, and again, people will say, well, maybe some of these topics like racism and bigotry should be handled in a blunt way. You shouldn't beat around the bush with it. Yeah, I agree with that too. I agree that topics like racism and bigotry are evil things and bad things, and I don't think, you need to mince words by going, well, here's the gray area of what. But if you're trying, but you're not writing a speech, you're not writing a blog article, you're not writing a column called "Racism is Bad." You're writing a story, and the story has to be able to, tell a tale. There's a massive, this is an important point. I'll see if I can make it well. There's a massive difference between writing an article for The Atlantic that says, here's why racism is toxic and bad. And you're writing basically a thesis. You're writing you want to approach things in a concise way. It's why when you go to write articles in any kind of major publication, editors will tell you, edit yourself, shorten it down. Don't ramble on and on. You're supposed to present a concise case. And in storytelling, novels and comics and other things, you don't want to ramble on. Every page and every moment needs to count. But at the same time, you've got a slightly different task, especially when you're stepping into somebody else's characters, like Iceman, or some of the stuff that Jeremy Whitley would do over in Wasp. You're stepping into existing characters and existing universe. And so you need to make, every character needs to feel alive. You got to win people over through your story. Whereas in a blog or an article, you have to win people over with your thesis. And those are two different things. And so what I see a lot in comic books right now is people really just want to write their thesis, and the characters become the props for their thesis as opposed to fully functional, three-dimensional, engaged characters. So there's a world of difference between those two. And so I go back to my original point, which I was trying to make on racism, which is I think racism topics, not racist topics, racism as a topic, as a subject matter, is a way to tell a story about kind of the dangers of racism, what it does to people, how, so here, I'll give you an example. Brian Edward Hill for American Carnage, I felt wrote a very nuanced, very clever story on racism. And it was not just two-dimensional characters wandering around shouting slogans at each other. It was, here's the depth of what's going on. Here's how it burns at people. Here's how it digests in different ways. Here's how fighting it just by saying, I kill Nazis is not effective. Here's why it's a difficult topic. I think he handled it really, really well. He handled it like a storyteller. And I think if I go to Tom King or Jonathan Hickman or Scott Snyder, I think they handle topics with depth. Now, not all. I mean, every now and then you get a storyline that feels a little more ham-fisted than others. But the story of Superman trapped in this place by the World Forger, and his escape, and how how his hope and inspiration shone a light, and there he was touching on very sensitive, very deep topics, and he was doing it in such a way that was really delicate, really elegant. And I think that you can make the argument, well, hey, a lot of the writers coming along are basically told by Sobolski or others that they've got 6 issues and they got to, write as if every issue is their last. And so in that model, I think, people do get to a little bit more ham-fisted. It does lend itself more to a more thesis-driven argument. But that's not telling a good story. You can win people over. So this is by the way, this is solving one of the problems with why is it that people will come along and they say, I absolutely love that Scene of Grace Iceman book, and it really spoke to me. It was great. And then others, people say it was terrible, it was awful. It's not just a breakdown of open-minded progressive people versus homophobics. That's not the two sides. I think more of it plays into people who are coming into comics and they haven't really read many comics or don't really pay much attention, and they're reading it kind of as a standalone story or a standalone moment. So their minds are more in a thesis kind of state, and the comic speaks to that. And then I think another group is the group that has been following the X-Men for 30 years, and they're on board for the big story. They're on board for the nuance, and they've been conditioned of things playing out over 24, 48 issues. And what's funny is Saga right now is definitely playing the long game. with its comic. It's definitely laying things out. And if you look at kind of the arcs of how characters have come and gone and lived and died, they're not rushing things through. Same thing with The Walking Dead. Same thing with a lot of contemporary comics. That storytelling model is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. One of the reasons why Tom King's Batman run, in my opinion, went south and got really hijacked is because I do believe he had a plan for 100 issues that he was going to roll through. And then editorial came in and, his story kind of went sideways over into Batman, Catwoman. And I mean, he's going to continue the story over there. And this is a good business decision by DC to, basically get another Batman book out that they can sell. So it's just more profits. I mean, again, a lot of people with the Batman situation need to realize that you have Batman, you have Detective Comics, and you have all the Black Label Batman stuff. And basically, this is a plus one of yet another Batman book that people are going to pick up and buy. So this was a let's make more money kind of decision, not a Tom King sucks, let's get him off the book. Because if that was the case, they could just take him off the book. But regardless of all that, his run was shortened and it hurt the story. I mean, the story got weirdly compressed and strange as a result. The invasion back into City of Bane and all that got weird. It definitely felt like things were being crammed together and smushed together. That's the challenge here, and so that's why I say, good storytellers will tell good stories, and topics like racism, topics like global warming, topics like bigotry, topics like any of these topics. These are big, serious, difficult topics. These are things that people struggle with. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of challenge. There's a lot of problems in the world that these face. And so you have to treat them with some respect. So I think you should, if you're a writer, don't take up these huge, weighty topics if you can't do the job well. If you can't do the job well, don't do it. I know you want to work in comics, but maybe instead of trying to cram in a big lesson on homophobia or bigotry, I mean, some of the ways bigotry was rolled out in the Unstoppable Wasp comic were terrible. I mean, just terrible. And can we blame the writer? Maybe, but we can also blame the fact that, I mean, we're trying to bring up homophobia and bigotry in 22 pages with characters we've never met before, interacting with characters that have been around for 5 decades. That's not going to work. That's never going to work. And you won't be able to do it well. The best you're going to be able to do is tell some super hacked together kind of thesis in the page of a comic. That won't work. What do you think? Does this make sense? Does it resonate? I made a point in there about how people who expect stories versus people who expect theses, and how those two groups come together. I think if I've said one thing intelligent today, I think that's it. I think there's a lesson in there and something valuable. But be curious what you think. What's your opinion on all this? How do you view it? Would love to get your take on it. Please drop me a note. Would love to have it. Like, subscribe. Hey, guy who downvotes all my videos, you should subscribe. You'll get that reminder that you're supposed to do it. Set that bell for notification. Downvote. Clean path. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Thanks for listening to my rambling today.